Drive back to Millhaven takes 4 hours if you hit the interstate right, and I'd done it enough times to know exactly where the corn gives way to strip malls and then to the water tower painted with the hawk that someone repainted every few years so it never quite looked the same. I hadn't been home in 14 months. I told myself it was the schedule. Partly it was. My stepfather had called 3 weeks before to let me know the hospital was holding a gala, their annual fundraiser. But this year they were adding a special recognition ceremony for the physicians who'd built the cardiac unit back in the 80s. He'd been one of them. 40 years on staff. It was a big deal for him. And I understood that. And I said I'd come. What he didn't tell me, or maybe didn't ping to, was that my stepmother would be coordinating the event. Her name is Patrice. She married my stepfather when I was 9, and she has never once in 20-some years looked at me like I belonged in any room she was standing in. I pulled off the exit and the old feelings came with it. Not dread exactly, more like bracing. The way you tighten your grip before a wave hits, not because you're afraid, but because you've been knocked over before and you remember the water. The house looked the same. It always does. My stepfather met me at the door and held me for a long moment, the way he has since I was small, one hand at the back of my head. He smelled like the same cedar soap he's used my whole life. I pressed my face into his shoulder and let myself be 9 years old for exactly 3 seconds. You look thin, he said, pulling back to look at me. I look exactly the same. You look thin, he smiled. Come in. Patrice is on the phone with the venue. I brought my bag upstairs to the guest room. Still the guest room, even though I'd slept there more nights than I could count. There's a print of a lighthouse on the wall that's been there since before I can remember. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at it for a minute. Downstairs, I could hear Patrice's voice, clipped and efficient, talking about centerpieces. We had dinner that night, the three of us. She made roast chicken, which she does well, and we talked about the ceremony, and my stepfather told me about the other physicians being honored, most of whom I'd met at various points growing up. He was proud. He lit up talking about it, the way he always does when medicine comes up. The particular brightness in his eyes when something matters to him. Patrice asked about my work once. Just once. Still at the research institute. Still there, I said. Oh, aim. She reached for the bread. That was the end of that. I hadn't told either of them about the promotion. There hadn't seemed to be a right moment, and then the moment had passed. And then it seemed strange to bring up. And then enough time had gone by that telling them started to feel like an announcement, which felt like asking for something. I didn't want to ask Patrice for anything, even attention, so I said nothing. The gala was at the Millhaven Civic Center, which had been renovated twice since I was a kid and now looked like every other renovated civic center in every other mid-sized American city. High ceilings, new lighting. A bar set up near the entrance with a young man in a vest, asking if you wanted still or sparkling. I wore a navy dress and low heels. Practical. I'd come from work essentially, had changed in the car at the rest stop outside town, which my stepfather would have found horrifying if I told him. He was inside already, with a group of men his age, all of them in suits that fit the way suits fit men who've worn them for 40 years, effortlessly, like a second skin. He looked happy. I stood in the doorway for a moment and just watched him. My real father, the one I chose, the one who showed up. Patrice found me before I'd gotten 3 steps inside. You're here, she said in the tone people use when they're mildly surprised you kept a commitment. I said I'd come. She looked at my dress. Not long. Just a glance, the kind that takes stock. Your stepfather's over there. Try to stay near him during the reception. The photographers are going to be moving through the room, and I want good family shots. I nodded. I got a glass of sparkling water and moved toward the crowd. The room filled quickly. Millhaven is small enough that a hospital gala is genuinely the event of the season, and people came dressed for it. Local government, physicians, board members, a few faces I recognized from television because they were the kind of faces that ended up on local television. I shook hands with people who'd known me since I was a child, who asked about my work with the careful politeness of people who weren't entirely sure what I did. Research, I said each time. Biomedical research. Oh, wonderful! Your stepfather must be so proud. I smiled. I moved on. At some point, Patrice materialized beside me again, this time with a woman I didn't know. Someone from the hospital board by the look of her, wearing a lanyard that said donor relations. This is my stepdaughter, Patrice said. She's been living up north. Oh, doing what? The woman asked pleasantly. Patrice answered before I could. She's been bouncing around, tried a few things. She's at some research facility now, but honestly, she gave a small light laugh. I don't think she ever really found her footing. Not like her stepfather. Some people just take longer, don't they? The woman smiled uncertainly and looked at me. I looked back. There's a thing that happens when someone says something like that in public. Time goes a little strange. You hear the words, and part of you processes them, and part of you goes very quiet, and you make a decision in that quiet about what to do. I've made that decision before with Patrice. I've made it 100 times, going back to when I was 9 years old, and she told my grandmother that I was a difficult child while I was standing 4 feet away. I smiled. I said, "You're probably right." And I excused myself to refresh my water. The recognition ceremony started at 8. The room arranged itself into rows, and a woman from the hospital's executive team stood at the podium and spoke about legacy and about service and about what it means to build something that outlasts you. My stepfather was in the front row with 4 other physicians, all of them looking slightly uncomfortable with the attention in the way that people who've spent decades focused outward on patients tend to look when the focus comes back around to them. I stood near the back. There was a man beside me I didn't recognize. Tall, late 50s, silver haired, in a dark suit. He was watching the ceremony with the focused, respectful attention of someone who understood what was being honored. We didn't speak during the ceremony. My stepfather received his award third. He gave a short speech. He thanked the nurses before he thanked any of the other physicians, which made several people in the audience laugh softly because that's exactly who he is. He said something about his daughter. He called me his daughter, just that, not his stepdaughter, and looked out into the room, and I raised my hand slightly so he could find me, and he smiled. I saw Patrice, 2 rows ahead of me, watching him smile at me. Her expression didn't change. The reception after the ceremony was louder, warmer. The bar did more business. People clustered and split and reclustered. I found my stepfather and stayed close for a while, met people he wanted me to meet, laughed at the right times. At some point, Patrice gathered a small group nearby, a few board members, a physician I didn't know, the woman from donor relations from earlier. She was telling them a story. I caught the shape of it before I caught the words. Something about her family, about her stepfather's pride, about the difficulty of raising a child who came to you already formed. Then she left her PhD program, just walked away. 3 years in, said it wasn't the right fit. A pause. I think she's still trying to figure out what the right fit is. She's at a government research facility of some kind now. I think they do good work there, though I honestly couldn't tell you exactly what she does. The small group made sympathetic sounds. I was standing 6 feet away. She didn't look at me. The man in the dark suit was nearby again. I noticed him because he'd gone still, the way people go still when they hear something they weren't expecting. He turned his head and looked at me. "Excuse me," he said. "I don't think we've met. I'm Dr. Me. Hargrove. I'm on the NIH advisory board, up from Bethesda for the week." "I'm sorry," I said. "I don't think we have." He shook my hand. And then his expression shifted. The particular shift of recognition, the kind that happens when someone places a face. "Wait," he said. "Is your last name Keen?" Patrice had gone quiet. "It is," I said. "Catherine Keen?" He said my full name slowly, like he was checking it against something in his memory. "You authored the Keen-Morrison Protocol, the immunotherapy framework, the one they're implementing at Johns Hopkins and Mass General." I nodded once. He turned to look at the people around him, the board members, the physician, the donor relations woman, Patrice, with an expression that was not unkind but was also not confused about anything. Her team's work is projected to change the treatment trajectory for about 40,000 patients a year, he said, in the tone of someone reciting a fact that he assumes everyone already knows. We've been trying to get her on a federal advisory panel for 2 years. She keeps saying she's too busy. He looked back at me, amused and a little reproachful. Are you still too busy? I said. I'm afraid so. He laughed. He shook my hand again with both of his. It's an honor, he said. Genuinely, I am not sure exactly what I looked like in that moment. I've tried to reconstruct it. I think I just stood there. I think I said something ordinary. Something like, thank you, it's good to meet you. And I think he moved on because he was the kind of man who has 20 conversations at an event and gives each one his full attention and then moves to the next. I am sure of what Patrice looked like. She was very still. Her glass was in her hand and she was very still. And the donor relations woman had turned away to talk to someone else, and the board members had drifted, and my stepfather had somehow appeared from across the room. He has a radar for me. He always has, and was standing close enough to have heard at least the last part of it. He put his hand on my shoulder. He didn't say anything right away. He just stood there with his hand on my shoulder. Patrice looked at me, then at him, then at her glass. I didn't know, she said finally. Her voice was flat. My stepfather said quietly, you didn't ask. We left not long after. The event was winding down anyway, and my stepfather made his goodbyes, warm, easy, the way he does everything, and I found my coat, and the three of us walked to the parking lot with the careful distance of people who have said something true that cannot now be unsaid. In the car, he reached back from the passenger seat and squeezed my hand. He held onto it for a moment longer than you'd hold a hand if you were just being kind. He held it like someone holding on to something they almost let themselves lose. 40,000 patients, he said. Not to anyone. Just to the dark outside the window. It's projected, I said. Could be fewer. Could be more. Could be. He let go of my hand. I watched the highway signs pick up in the headlights and fall away. Patrice drove. She didn't speak. I didn't expect an apology that night. I knew better. Patrice is not someone who apologizes easily. And when she does, it's usually sideways. A changed subject, a gesture, a meal. Maybe someday. Maybe not. I've stopped counting on it. What I had was the other thing, the quieter thing. I had my stepfather's hand in the dark. I had 40 years of him showing up for me, and now he knew, fully, in public, in a room full of people who mattered to him, what I had been doing with the years he gave me room to grow. That was enough. More than enough. The hawk on the water tower caught the headlights as we passed back through town. Someone had repainted it again. It looked almost the same as it always did, and also somehow different, the way things look when you see them after you've stopped pretending you don't care about them. I stopped pretending a long time ago. I just hadn't been back to say so. Now I had. I've thought a lot about that parking lot. The three of us walking out with too much space between us. The kind of space that isn't accidental. Patrice's heels on the pavement, my stepfather's hand finding mine in the back seat of the car. What strikes me now isn't the moment in the room. Dr. Hargrove saying my name, the way the conversation stopped. That part is easy to replay. What strikes me is what came before it. Years of it. The quiet decision, made over and over again, to keep working when no one who was supposed to love me was watching, to care about the thing itself, the research, the patients I would never meet, the framework that existed in data long before it existed in anyone's recognition of me. That choice, made in ordinary moments, in ordinary rooms, is what made the Millhaven moment possible. Not luck, not timing. Accumulated honesty about what actually mattered. There's something I've come to believe about the way life tends to settle accounts, and it has nothing to do with fate or the universe balancing some cosmic ledger. It's simpler and less dramatic than that. When you do real work, careful, rigorous, honest work, it leaves a record. That record travels ahead of you into rooms you haven't entered yet. Dr. Hargrove didn't walk into that gala to vindicate me. He walked in as himself, a man who knows the field, and the field told him who I was before I said a word. That's not karma in any mystical sense. That's just what integrity does over time. It compounds. Patrice said she didn't know, and I believed her because she genuinely hadn't asked. That's the thing about dismissing someone early. You close the file. You stop updating your information. She decided who I was when I was 9 years old, difficult and already fond, and she kept that version of me on the shelf for 2 decades while I went ahead and became someone else entirely. Her not knowing wasn't cruelty by that point. It was just the natural consequence of not being curious about the truth. I don't tell this story to settle anything. My stepfather knows now. That's what I came for, really. Not the vindication, but the chance to be fully seen by the one person whose seeing always mattered. He called me his daughter in front of a room full of people. He held my hand in the dark on the way home. Those are the things I'll keep. What I want, if I want anything for anyone watching, is just this. Do the work that is real to you, even when it's invisible. Stay honest about what you actually know versus what you only believe. And when life gets hard, and it will get hard, in the specific, grinding way it gets hard for people who are trying to build something, don't let the people who've already written you off borrow any of your energy. They made their choice. You have a protocol to finish. My stepfather said it quietly, to the dark outside the window, 40,000 patients. I said it could be fewer. He said it could be more. He was right. It could always be more.